An unexpected encounter. Mia adjusted her apron, glancing at the clock above the diner's counter. It was nearing 7 p.m., the time when the dinner rush usually tapered off, leaving a slower pace to wind down her shift. For most, the little diner tucked off the highway was just a pit stop, a place to grab a meal before continuing their journey. For Mia, it was her lifeline. At 28, she balanced long hours here with raising her 6-year-old son, Jordan. Every tip, every paycheck went toward keeping their modest apartment and paying for Jordan's growing list of school supplies. She moved gracefully from table to table, her warm smile a shield against the exhaustion clawing at her. The regulars knew her story, or parts of it. A few would slip an extra dollar or two when they could. But Mia never asked for sympathy. She had learned early on that the world wasn't fair, and her only choice was to keep moving forward. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Mia's attention. She looked up, expecting another road-weary traveler. Instead, a man walked in with a quiet confidence that made the air in the room feel heavier. He wore a simple button-up shirt and jeans, his weathered face partially hidden by a hat pulled low. It took her a moment, but when he glanced her way, she knew exactly who he was. Clint Eastwood. Her breath hitched. She wasn't one to fawn over celebrities. She didn't have the time or energy for it. But this was different. Clint Eastwood was an icon, someone her late father used to talk about while they watched old westerns together. For a brief second, memories of those moments flickered in her mind, but she didn't have time to dwell. Clint settled into a corner booth, and Mia knew it was her turn to serve him. This wasn't just another customer. Something about his quiet presence made her pulse quicken. Mia grabbed her notepad and pen, took a deep breath, and approached the booth. As she got closer, she noticed the subtle details, his hands, slightly weathered but steady, resting on the table, and the piercing eyes beneath the brim of his hat that seemed to see everything without giving much away. He looked up as she stopped beside him, his expression calm, almost unreadable. "Good evening," she began, her voice steadier than she expected. "What can I get started for you?" He glanced at the menu briefly before setting it aside. "Just a coffee and a burger. Medium rare. No onions." Simple enough. Mia jotted it down, but she couldn't ignore the faint tremor in her hand as she turned to leave. Clint's voice stopped her. "Busy night?" She turned back to him, surprised. Most customers didn't bother with small talk unless they were regulars. "Not too bad," she replied, smiling faintly. "Keeps me on my toes." He nodded, his expression softening just slightly. "You've got a good pace. Not easy to keep up in a place like this." She blinked, unsure how to respond. Was he complimenting her? Clint Eastwood, a man she'd only ever seen in movies, was noticing her work ethic. She managed a polite smile before retreating to the counter to put in his order. But her mind raced with questions. Why was he here? In this tiny diner off the highway? He could afford the fanciest restaurants in California. Yet here he was, sipping water from a chipped glass, waiting for a burger like any other traveler. When the order was ready, Mia carried the plate and coffee to his table. She set them down carefully, catching a brief appreciative glance from him. "Thank you," he said simply. "You're welcome," she replied, trying to sound casual. But she couldn't help feeling like this moment, this ordinary interaction, was somehow different. As she moved to serve other tables, she noticed he wasn't in any rush to eat. He sat there, almost contemplative, occasionally sipping his coffee. But why did it feel like he wasn't just here to eat? Something about his presence lingered in the back of her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this night was far from ordinary. Mia kept herself busy, refilling coffee cups, clearing tables, and taking new orders. But she couldn't help glancing toward Clint's booth every so often. He ate slowly, almost methodically, as if he had all the time in the world. Occasionally, their eyes met, and he'd give her a polite nod, a silent acknowledgement that made her stomach flutter. Then, as she walked past, Clint suddenly spoke. "You remind me of someone." She stopped, her heart skipping a beat. "Oh," she asked, turning toward him. He nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly as if studying her. "My mother. She worked in a diner, too, raised us on her own." Mia swallowed, the words hitting closer than she expected. She must have been a strong woman, she said quietly. She was. His voice carried a note of something deeper, something rare. A brief silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant hum of the diner's neon sign and the clinking of silverware. Mia shifted slightly, unsure of what to say next. Then Clint reached into his jacket, pulling out a crisp $100 bill. "For the meal," he said, placing it on the table. Then, before she could respond, he pulled out another and slid it toward her. "For you. Because I know how hard this job is." Mia's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just about the money. It was the recognition, the acknowledgement of the struggle she rarely spoke about. I can't take this," she stammered, shaking her head. "Yes, you can," he said simply, his expression leaving no room for argument. Tears pricked the edges of her vision, but she blinked them away. Instead, she straightened and nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Eastwood." Clint gave her one last look, something warm, something knowing. Then he stood, adjusting his hat before walking toward the door. As the bell chimed behind him, Mia stood frozen for a moment, staring at the bills on the table. The weight of the encounter settled over her, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. She tucked the money into her apron, her fingers lingering over it for just a moment longer. Then, with a deep breath, she turned back toward the counter, ready to finish her shift, but somehow, everything felt just a little lighter. Because sometimes, a stranger walking into your life for just a brief moment can change everything. A letter from a legend. After finishing his meal, Clint Eastwood gestured to Mia with a slight raise of his hand. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked over, careful to keep her expression composed. "Everything all right?" she asked, her voice steady. "Perfect," he said with a small smile. "That was one of the best burgers I've had in a long time." She chuckled lightly, the compliment catching her off guard. "Well, I'll let the cook know. He'll appreciate hearing that." For a moment, Clint didn't say anything. He simply looked at her, and in that brief silence, it felt like he was studying her, not in a judgmental way, but with a kind of curiosity that made her feel exposed yet oddly seen. "You've got a good energy about you," he said finally. "You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago." Mia blinked, unsure how to respond. Was this a compliment? A memory? She couldn't tell. "Well, thank you," she managed, her cheeks warming. "I just try to get through the day like everyone else." He nodded, his eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite place. "That's the trick, isn't it? Just getting through." Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills. He placed them on the table along with a folded piece of paper. "Keep the change," he said, standing up, "and read this when you get a moment." Mia stared at the note, her heart pounding. "Thank you," she said softly, unsure if he even heard her as he walked toward the door. The bell above it jingled as he left. And just like that, he was gone. For a few moments, she stood frozen by the booth, staring at the note as if it might burn her fingers. What could he have possibly written? And why did he seem so intent on her reading it? But the questions would have to wait. There were still tables to serve, and Mia wasn't the type to leave her duties unfinished, even if her mind was racing with anticipation. By the time Mia cleared Clint's booth, the diner had quieted down. The last of the evening's customers were sipping their coffee or chatting softly, and the background hum of the jukebox filled the room. She picked up the folded note with trembling fingers, slipping it into her apron pocket as she finished cleaning the table. She wasn't sure why she felt so anxious. It was just a note, right? Once her shift was over, Mia slipped into the back room to collect her things. Her curiosity finally got the better of her, and she pulled out the paper, carefully unfolding it. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and her breath hitched. "Dear Mia, I don't know much about you, but in the short time I've been here, I've seen something rare, true resilience. Watching how you manage this place with grace, even under pressure, is a reminder of how much strength exists in the everyday heroes of this world. You remind me of someone very dear to me, someone who taught me the value of hard work and kindness. I don't know your story, but I can see in your eyes that you've carried more than your share of burdens. That's why I want to do something. No strings attached." Mia's hands began to shake as she continued reading. "I'm leaving a small gesture for you to use however you see fit, whether it's for your child, your future, or simply a moment of rest. I hope it brings you some peace. People like you deserve to be seen." Tears blurred Mia's vision as she lowered the note. Her fingers trembled as she reached into her apron pocket, pulling out the cash Clint had left behind. When she unfolded the bills, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just a generous tip, it was $1,000. Her knees nearly buckled as the weight of the moment hit her. For years, she had worked tirelessly, barely scraping by, giving every ounce of herself to ensure her son had a better life. And now, in a single night, a stranger had seen her. Not just her work, not just her service, but her. A sob caught in her throat, but she swallowed it down, pressing the note against her chest. Clint Eastwood didn't owe her anything. He could have left without a word, gone about his life without ever acknowledging her struggles. But instead, he had taken the time to remind her that she mattered. Mia wiped her eyes, inhaling deeply to steady herself. She wasn't sure what she would do with the money yet. But one thing was certain: this was more than just a financial gift. It was hope. Hope that her hard work wasn't in vain. Hope that kindness still existed in the world. Hope that, no matter how hard things got, she wasn't invisible. As she walked out of the diner that night, the crisp autumn air felt different, lighter, warmer, full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, Mia allowed herself to believe that better days were ahead. A gift that changed everything. Mia's hands trembled as she unfolded the note. The words were already burned into her memory. "I hope it brings you some peace. People like you deserve to be seen. And I see you." But what was inside made her breath hitch. A check. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw the amount. $10,000. Her knees buckled, and she sat down hard on the bench in the back room, her body suddenly too weak to hold her upright. Tears streamed down her face, her chest rising and falling in uneven gasps. It wasn't just the money, though that alone was life-changing. It was why Clint Eastwood, a man whose name carried weight far beyond this small-town diner, had noticed her, really noticed her, and he had cared enough to do something about it. For someone who had spent years feeling invisible, just another waitress behind the counter, just another struggling single mom trying to stay afloat. This moment was overwhelming. But even as she tried to process it all, one question remained: why her? And perhaps more importantly, what was she going to do with this unexpected gift? Mia sat in the back room for what felt like hours, her mind swirling with emotions. The check in her hands felt surreal, like something out of a dream. She thought about the bills stacked on her kitchen counter, the second-hand sneakers her son, Jordan, had been wearing for months, and the leaky faucet in their tiny apartment that she couldn't afford to fix. This money could change so much. But beyond the financial relief, Clint's words lingered in her mind. "You remind me of someone very dear to me." Who was that person? What had made Clint Eastwood, of all people, see something in her? It wasn't just the money or the note. It was the way he had looked at her, with a kind of respect and recognition she hadn't felt in years. Mia wiped her tears and took a deep breath. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself, so she called her best friend, Tasha, the one person who had been her rock through every struggle. Within minutes, Tasha was at the diner, sitting across from Mia in one of the empty booths. "Wait, wait, wait," Tasha said, holding up her hands as Mia handed her the note. "You're telling me Clint Eastwood left you this?" Mia nodded, her eyes still puffy from crying. "I don't even know why. I didn't do anything special." Tasha read the note silently, her eyes widening with each word. When she got to the check, she let out a low whistle. "Girl, this is insane. Do you know what this could mean for you and Jordan?" "I know," Mia whispered, "but it doesn't feel real. Why would someone like him care about someone like me?" Tasha reached across the table and grabbed Mia's hands. "Because he saw you. Mia, he saw what I've seen all along. You work harder than anyone I know, and you never let life break you. People notice that kind of strength. Mia stared down at the check, her heart heavy with gratitude, but also with doubt. What if I don't deserve it? She murmured. What if this is some kind of mistake? It's not a mistake, Tasha said firmly. You do deserve it. The question is, what are you going to do with it? That was the question, wasn't it? And as much as Mia wanted to celebrate, she couldn't ignore the weight of this unexpected gift or the responsibility that came with it. That night, Mia sat at her kitchen table long after Jordan had gone to bed. The note and check lay in front of her, the dim kitchen light flickering faintly overhead. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the old pipes. Her thoughts ran in 1,000 directions. This money could pay their overdue rent, replace the unreliable car she depended on, give Jordan opportunities she could only dream of until now. But as exciting as the possibilities were, they also scared her. She picked up the note again, reading Clint's words for the 10th time. I hope it brings you some peace. People like you deserve to be seen, and I see you. Those words struck a chord deeper than she'd expected. How many years had she spent just surviving, working double shifts, skipping meals so Jordan could have enough, pushing herself to the brink of exhaustion? Through it all, she had felt invisible, like the world didn't care whether she made it or not. But Clint Eastwood had seen her. He had seen her struggle, her determination, her resilience. And in that moment, she realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about believing that she was worthy of something better. She thought about her father, who had always been her biggest cheerleader before he passed. He used to say, "Don't let the world wear you down. Kid, you've got a fire in you." For the first time in years, she felt that fire flicker again. Mia grabbed a notepad and began scribbling ideas, things she could do with the money. Yes, she could pay bills. Yes, she could buy Jordan the things he needed. But maybe, just maybe, she could do something more, something bigger. A college fund for Jordan, a savings cushion so she wouldn't have to work double shifts anymore. Maybe even taking a class for herself, something that could lead to a better future. The possibilities were endless. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt hope. She placed the check back in the envelope, running her fingers over Clint's signature. Then, with a deep breath, she whispered, "Thank you." That night, Mia didn't just go to bed feeling financially secure. She went to bed knowing she was seen, that her hard work wasn't in vain, that kindness still existed in the world. The ripple effect of kindness. Mia sat at her kitchen table, the early morning sunlight streaming through the window, painting golden streaks across the worn wooden surface. In front of her lay the check and Clint Eastwood's note, neatly folded after a long night of reflection. She had made her decision. She sipped her coffee, watching her 6-year-old son, Jordan, play with his action figures on the old carpet. His laughter filled the room, a sound that always reminded her why she worked so hard. Clint's gift wasn't just about the money. It was an opportunity, a second chance, and she was going to make it count. The first thing she did was call Tasha. I need to take care of something today, Mia explained, her voice steady but nervous. Can you watch Jordan for a few hours? Tasha didn't hesitate. Of course, girl. You do what you need to do. I got you. With Jordan happily settled at Tasha's house, Mia took a deep breath and set off for the bank. The check felt heavy in her purse, not because of its monetary value, but because of what it represented, a turning point. At the bank, the teller, a young woman with a bright smile, raised an eyebrow when she saw the amount. That's quite a deposit, she said, her tone polite but curious. Mia nodded, offering a small smile. It's a gift. The teller didn't press further, and as Mia watched the check clear, a strange mix of emotions washed over her: relief, excitement, and an almost crushing sense of responsibility. This money wasn't just for her. It was a chance to rewrite her story, to give Jordan a better life. And that's exactly what she intended to do. Mia's next stop was the local community college. For years, she had walked past the campus, wondering what it would feel like to sit in a classroom again, to learn, to grow. Now, she was finally ready to find out. Her hands trembled as she approached the admissions desk. A kind-faced woman greeted her with a warm smile. How can I help you today? Mia swallowed the lump in her throat, and said the words she never thought she'd have the chance to say. "I'd like to enroll in accounting." The woman's smile widened. "You're in the right place. Let's get you started." As Mia filled out the paperwork, a sense of purpose settled over her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about showing Jordan that dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed, were always worth chasing. And that realization sparked another thought. What if this wasn't just an opportunity for her? What if Clint's gesture wasn't just a gift but a spark, one that could light a much bigger flame? Weeks turned into months, and Mia's life transformed in ways she never imagined. She balanced her shifts at the diner with evening classes at the community college. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. Jordan noticed the change, too. "My mom's going to college," he'd proudly tell his friends. And every time Mia heard those words, she couldn't help but smile. But it wasn't just her life she wanted to change. Inspired by Clint's kindness, Mia set aside a portion of the money to help others in her community. She paid for a struggling single mother's groceries. She bought textbooks for a student who couldn't afford them. She quietly left extra-large tips for waitresses who reminded her of herself. Clint's note had encouraged her to pay it forward, and she did, one act of kindness at a time. One evening, as Mia flipped through her accounting textbook at the kitchen table, Jordan tugged at her sleeve. "Mom," he asked, his big brown eyes full of curiosity, "do you think that man will ever come back to the diner?" Mia paused, the thought catching her off guard. Would Clint Eastwood ever return? She didn't know, but his impact on her life was something she would carry forever. "Maybe," she said softly, ruffling Jordan's hair. "But even if he doesn't, he's always going to be part of our story." And that was the truth. Clint's gesture had reminded Mia of the power of kindness, of truly seeing someone and lifting them up when the world felt heavy. It had reignited her belief in herself, in life's possibilities, and in the importance of giving back. That night, as she closed her textbook and prepared for bed, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, one step at a time. And so, the next time a stranger walked into her section at the diner, Mia greeted them with the same warmth and grace, knowing that sometimes, even the smallest interactions could change a life forever. The power of kindness and paying it forward. Mia's story is a reminder that kindness has a ripple effect, often reaching further than we can ever imagine. In life, we never know who might be watching, who might need a small act of generosity to change their course. Whether it's offering a helping hand, encouraging someone when they feel unseen, or simply showing gratitude, these gestures can transform lives. Like Clint Eastwood's unexpected gift, your kindness today could be the spark that inspires someone else tomorrow. So never underestimate the power of a small act. It might just create a future brighter than you ever imagined.